Today on CityCast Philly. This week, the city and the nation is celebrating Independence Day. We're also looking ahead 2 years to July 4th, 2026. That will be the semi-quincentennial or the nation's 250th anniversary. But is Philly ready for these celebrations? It's Wednesday, July 3rd. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Stephanie Farr, Philly culture columnist at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Glad to have you back on the show.
Nice to be back, Trenae. Thank you.
Stephanie, 2026 is set to be a really, really big year for Philly. We've got tons of big events like the MLB All-Star Game, PGA Championship, NCAA March Madness, and the FIFA World Cup. Plus, this little thing called the 250th anniversary of the nation. Stephanie, what is this going to look like for Philly?
I think it's hard to tell right now. We have everybody talking about it, and we hear there are plans. We don't often hear what those plans are right now. I think if you're going to look at anything, maybe it is the celebratory feeling of Wah Wah Welcome America, with the crowds of the 2015 papal visit. The nation and the world with the World Cup is coming to Philadelphia in 2026. And whatever happens, it will be massive. And the question is, are we going to be at our best selves in time?
Great question. But you report that U.S. Representative Brendan Boyle, who represents Independence Park and Old City, said we're, quote, woefully behind when it comes to this semi-quincentennial celebrations. Why is that?
Well, Boyle just took over the district in a redistricting last year. There's also a new superintendent at Independence National Historical Park who took over last year. So there are a lot of new faces. And then Catherine Ott Lovell, who was with the city's Parks and Rec department, is now head of Independence Visitor Center. So I think you have a lot of people coming on board who are just realizing what the level of preparation was before they were in those roles, and it may have not been what they would have liked it if they were there in place 10 years ago. But I also think it's just, listen, the cornerstone of any celebration for the 250th has got to be Independence Hall and the park and all of these incredible historic sites where the signing of the Declaration actually happened. And the park is just so behind on funding. It's got $199 million in deferred maintenance, and its budget has been stagnant for the last decade or so. So they are not able to keep up with existing maintenance, let alone take on new projects. You're getting some of that addressed this year, about $85 million, but that's still more than half of that deferred maintenance remains. And so it's really hard, I think, for anybody at Independence National Historical Park or the stakeholders to maybe get creative and think about new and engaging ways that we could draw visitors and make for the best experience when they can't even keep up with the issues and the funding, problems that are there now.
But Stephanie, there are buildings within Independence Park that are actually closed, right?
Yeah, so you have several that have not been open for years, and they just can't even tell me when or if there's ever hope for them being open. So among them is the Bishop White House, the Dolly Todd House, and they're all still listed as places to go on the National Park Service's website. So even the National Park Service isn't doing a good job of telling people what to expect when they come to the park now.
Interesting. Is it staffing issues? Like, why are they missing, so much funding, so much money?
So, you think about how inflation has risen over the past few years, and to not get a budget increase for 10 years, that's really hard. But you have a staff of about 195 people there. This year, they were mandated, the park didn't get a decrease in its budget. It was mandated to give about $2 million in salary increases, which is totally fair. The people who work at the park deserve to be paid well. But the park didn't get any more money, so it had to find $2 million to cut from other programs and places within that that park service. And so last year you had Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell open until 7 p.m. in the summer. They can't afford to do that now. They just don't have the staffing. And so that they're both closed at 5 p.m. this summer. So as 2026 approaches, the park is actually less accessible to people, which is scary. You know, we should be on an uphill trajectory where it's getting more and more accessible and easier to use and navigate. And that's not the case.
More on this story after the break.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, CEO of CityCast. Or, as I can say now, thanks to a few weeks with Babbel, hola, soy David Plotz, el jefe de CityCast. What if in 2024 you got a little bit better every day? When you're learning a new language with Babbel, that's exactly what you're doing. And if Babbel can help me start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks, imagine what you could do in a full year. I got started with Babbel because I realized that my girlfriend, who's a native Spanish speaker, and my son, who's in AP Spanish, were conspiring against me, or I thought they were conspiring against me in Spanish. I wanted to know what they were talking about. And now, thanks to literally just a few weeks of Babbel, I'm starting to be able to eavesdrop. It is rare that something so fun and simple, and Babbel is super fun and very simple, is also so useful. So here's a special limited time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So, Stephanie, tell me about United for Independence, this recently created group to kind of bring more awareness of Independence Park.
Sure. United for Independence was born out of a group that started meeting last fall called the Historic District Partners. This is a group of 30 institutions, museums, and agencies in Philly's historic district that kind of came together to work collaboratively instead of in silos. Because when Independence Historical Park thrives, all of these organizations around there thrive, right? The museums are really, a lot of their visitors come directly from Independence National Historic Park to those museums. And so this group forms, and one of the committees within it is an advocacy committee that's calling itself United for Independence. And this committee was designed kind of twofold to raise awareness of the issues that are facing Independence National Historical Park. You know, I don't think a lot of people know how underfunded it is, and to also call for Philadelphians to fall back in love with their national park. You know, and my question was, did we ever really fall out of love with it? I don't know. I love it. I still get goosebumps when I see it, and I know a lot of people do too, but I don't think Philadelphians see it as a park like, you know, Rittenhouse Square or Norris Square or Federal. You know, it doesn't have this place in Philadelphians' hearts maybe like it should. I think that's because people often see it as a tourist destination, but I also don't think the park really promotes gathering as much as maybe other locations. So I think that's a struggle too, was getting people to relate to the park.
I want to go back to this advocacy group, right? And I'm sure, you know, there's people that are saying, yes, let's move forward. We can come together. We can get ready for 2026. And I'm sure there's also been, you know, some pushback as well. But Stephanie, I want to focus on the optimism. And does this group really think that they'll be ready for 2026?
Well, of the folks I spoke to, Stephen Sims, the new superintendent of the park, is incredibly optimistic. And I think, you know, that's really great. You do need somebody in that position who is optimistic, and he wants to collaborate. And I think that's really welcome from the other organizations in the Historic District Partnership. I think anybody who's leading one of these groups, that are going to help plan for the 250th, like America 250, which is the organization that's supposed to be planning for the semi-quincentennial. And then you have state level organizations. So there's an America 250 PA, there's an America 250 New York, and then Philly has an even smaller organization for the citywide efforts. So I think you have, people who will be optimistic and who are optimistic. But I also think you need the people who are getting the information behind the scenes and going, wait a minute, yeah, we're excited, but we're not there yet. And we need to start talking about how quickly we can get there.
Stephanie, I'm always curious, how did you find this story?
Well, I got involved in this because I wrote an article about going to Boston, and I did not want to compliment Boston. It was against every fiber in my being, but I really liked their Freedom Trail, which is a 2.5-mile trail embedded in the sidewalk that takes you around the city's historical sites. And I couldn't help but think, why doesn't Philly have one of these? How is Boston, with their scrawny little buildings and bad attitude, how are they doing history better than we are in Philly? And, I learned there's a term for things that connect you along a path and help bring you from one point to another. And it's called wayfinding. And we're just historically bad at it here in Philadelphia. And so what I was calling for is let's get some wayfinding in the historic district and around Independence Park by 2026 to help not only tourists, but to engage residents who anybody loves going on an adventure, especially when they can do on their own and they don't need a tour guide for.
You know what I also think too is could be a little bit of a challenge too. And just to kind of expand this a little bit more, I mean, we're talking about colonial history, and that can often be a sensitive area of conversation, especially for different groups in America, where some might feel connected while others don't feel as connected. And so have you heard any ways in which there can be more of a bridging, and also taking it, to a more current state? I mean, is there a way that this group can bring more unity?
No, I think you make a great point, and I think it's a point that, Stephen Sims at the park and the folks with United for Independence, it is in the forefront of their minds, is how do we help everyone see their story in this story? Because, everybody wasn't included 250 years ago when the Declaration of Independence was signed, and it wasn't a perfect union, and it's still not a perfect union in the ways that we are thinking now. So I do think inclusivity, and telling everybody's story and not just the story of the dead white men, is really in the forefront of people's minds. How you do that, I don't know what they're thinking as of now. I haven't heard of, again, nobody's talking about advancements or improvements because they're just talking about, well, let's try and get this funding in place now. And I think that's what's upsetting. You could really miss a big opportunity here because to really, engage so many people with new programming, new activations, ones that speak to everyone in society. But if you can't fund, the maintenance, how do you start thinking about new ideas? Just one more thing. This didn't get in my column, but I talked with Catherine Ott-Lovell, president and CEO of the Philadelphia Visitors Center Corporation, which runs the Independence Visitors Center in cooperation with the National Park Service. I said earlier this year, you talk about wanting to expand stories to be more inclusive. I said earlier this year when there was talk of maybe removing the William Penn statue at Welcome Park, which is actually a part of Independence National Historical Park. I don't know if you'll remember, but there was all this blowback. Oh, they're trying to erase the memory of William Penn. Never mind. He's got the biggest statue in the city on top of City Hall. And so I said, so you want to do these good things, but then you immediately get blowback. How do you kind of work through that? And she said, I'd rather people be arguing about the park and discussing it and having healthy dialogue than nobody be talking about it at all, like Franklin Court or the Benjamin Franklin Museum. So I think there's just so much desire for just any dialogue around these places that, because some of them seem to have been forgotten, until something like that happens. And it shouldn't be the case.
Stephanie, do you think Independence Park can get ready in the next 24 months?
Oh, Trinae, I am an optimist even about Philly when I know that I shouldn't always be. I think it can get ready. I think I'm concerned whether it can be the best version of itself that it could be. I want to see us just shine. I want the world to know why we love Philly so much. But we all need to really start caring and, asking our elected officials and talking with each other about how they are going to ensure that this is not just going to be a celebration, but the best celebration that we could put on.
All right, that was Stephanie Farr, Philly culture columnist at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Thank you, Trinae.
To celebrate July 4th in Philly this year, check out the Wawa Welcome America celebrations. We'll have a link in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode about how Independence Park is planning for 2026, tell a friend. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. Tomorrow, we will be observing July 4th, but we'll be back Friday, July 5th, with a very special episode. You don't want to miss it. Enjoy your 4th, Philly. Bye.